welcome to the Daily Objective, and we want to talk about the latest out of Twitter, the sort of a story that keeps on telling. It's a sort of trying, like the gift that keeps on giving. There's a lot of content to get from Twitter. Elon Musk bought it. Then he's been sort of rolling out a new policy. We're going to talk about the policy, and we're going to talk about who's been reinstated and who's actually left, which is Sam Harris and Claire Lehmann, most notably. I'm here with a guy who, if you don't follow him on Twitter, well, other than the spelling of his name, there's really no reason, no excuse. It's Nikos Sotirakopoulos.
And why only on Twitter? Instagram, TikTok, everywhere.
That's right. All the full frontal male nudity you can handle on Instagram within terms of service. All right, and TikTok, of course, for all of you Zoomers out there. Okay, but let's get to the story. So, Sam Harris left Twitter, and then I saw Claire Lehmann left. I'm guessing they left in that order. Now, these are both people who have sort of made a name for themselves as being like they were not seduced by the populist right, even though at one point they were embraced by that sort of movement to a degree because they were anti-political correctness. So there was a point in time when, you know, Sam Harris and the Weinstein brothers and Ben Shapiro and Dave Rubin and Joe Rogan and Claire Lehmann and a handful of others, they did not include Yaron Brook, probably because he's not famous enough, and also a little bit too out. You know, his philosophy is too outrageous even for them. But looking back, that was kind of a favor they did him by not inviting him to the party. But this party was an odd assortment of people. And as time passed, I think, you know, like people like Rubin have proven themselves to very much be seduced by the right. Someone like Jordan Peterson, I don't know if he was part of this for sure, the intellectual dark web, the so-called IDW. But I don't know if it's right to say he was seduced by the right, but just like the fact that he's a religious conservative became more clear as time passed, whereas people like, so the fact that both he and Sam Harris are anti-political correctness, let's say, or they're both for free speech was not enough to keep them in the same movement, in the same camp. So as time passed, they basically drifted apart in a major way. When Trump was banned from Twitter, that was a big dividing moment. So people like Rubin, like Peterson, and many others, they said, you know, I don't always like Trump, but he, you know, free speech. And they definitely saw something wrong with having a president banned from social media. Like someone like me, and maybe you agree, Nikos, like that's so cool that like a private citizen can tell the president to get off his property, whether it's on his website or whether it's his home. Like, you know, rule of law has the final word. That is cool. That is not the way Dave Rubin and some of his friends saw it. Someone like Sam Harris, I don't know if it was a property rights principle that was informing his position, but he very much disliked Trump always and continues to dislike Trump. I think often for very good reason that a lot of people don't like hearing about. Someone like Claire Lehmann, she was sort of pushed away by a lot of the sort of populist right-wingers, I think largely over the lockdowns and the vaccine. I don't know if she's for vaccine mandates, and I don't know if she's even for lockdowns, but maybe she certainly at least she didn't she told people not to exaggerate how bad lockdowns in Australia are. That was one of them, and she's just for the vaccine. I don't know if she's for the mandate or for anyone requiring that you be vaccinated. I truly don't know, but I'm guessing. But I know certainly she said don't exaggerate how dangerous the vaccine is, or don't understate how safe we know it to be. So she's very pro-vaccine in general, which of course puts a huge rift between her and much of the new right, much of today's conservatives or Republicans. So those two, Sam Harris and Claire Lehmann, and they're representing a large number of people who they're not on board with the woke stuff, but they're not crazy about Trump either. And their honeymoon with other free speech enthusiasts has been over for a while. The honeymoon is over, and they're going their separate ways. So now recently, Elon Musk purchased Twitter, and he's been reinstating people. And Donald Trump was restored. His account was restored, although Trump has yet to tweet. He's insisting that his new website, Truth Social, is more than enough. It'll be interesting to see how this develops. But a lot of people are trepidatious about this for good reasons. Of course, even the free speech people like Sam Harris, like Claire Lehmann, they're like saying, yeah, free speech, but that doesn't mean that Twitter should necessarily give a voice to people that are shown to be causing, undesirable things in the culture. Let's say in Trump's case, maybe they would say he incited an insurrection. Maybe that's what Sam Harris would say. When it comes to, just various Holocaust deniers, various explicit racists or whatever, people like Sam Harris or Claire Lehmann, they might say not necessarily that these people are shown to be causing damage right away, but just that their opinion is just so abhorrent that Twitter should properly silence them on Twitter's platform. So this is the sort of legalizing of all opinions on Twitter as of late, and it's not really all opinions. We'll get to that soon. But this sort of this virtual, this on the face of it legalizing and restoration of all people, of all points of view. It's another defining moment in the sort of corpse of what was the intellectual dark web. You have the certain free speech enthusiasts like Jordan Peterson who are celebrating it. And you have people like Sam Harris and Claire Lehmann who actually they've opted to leave Twitter altogether, presumably, maybe not even presumably, maybe clearly, certainly because of the fact that Twitter is becoming a sort of laissez-faire place for all points of view. So there's sort of the skinny, as we call it in America. Any thoughts so far?
Yeah. So if we want to see when the rift begins in intellectual dark web, so one moment is the elections of 2020. So during the summer of the riots, Sam Harris does one of the probably top 10 podcasts, top 5 podcasts I've ever heard in my life. It was his take after the George Floyd murder. And it was the biggest part of it, an excellent job on actually telling it as it is. And then Sam Harris is triggering the left. And then they say, oh, you see the intellectual dark web, they're just dog whistling to Trumpites. But then with the elections and Sam Harris being so anti-Trump, then also people from the right were against him. And with Sam Harris, what really tipped them was an interview he gave to Trigonometry some weeks ago, where he talked about the Hunter Biden laptop and the story that was covered by mainstream media. That was not covered, the opposite, that was hidden from mainstream media. And Sam Harris said something like, if this was a conspiracy, I'm for it. So he says that there's nothing that Hunter Biden could have done, or there's nothing that could be revealed that would be worse than Trump himself. So his point was that it's anything that's any cooperation between, let's say, opinion makers to make the story go away so that Trump would lose the election, so that Trump wouldn't have a story, wouldn't have a narrative against Biden, would be acceptable. Now, this is a view that I disagree with, but I don't consider it the end of the world. But for Sam Harris, it was for people who were around the intellectual dark web, was the last was the icing in the cake on how supposedly Sam Harris has gone completely mainstream, or has gone completely with the regime, for a lack of a better word. Also, not forget to mention the issue of the pandemic. Sam Harris was one of the few people before the lockdowns who was saying this is going to be very, very, very bad. So he actually locked himself down before the actual lockdowns. And of course, he was pro-vaccine, not necessarily pro-mandates, but pro-vaccine. And again, for many culture warriors of the right, this was unforgivable. So Twitter became toxic for Sam Harris lately. So many people, including people that either were his former intellectual friends and denounced him, or he had denounced them, and they were saying, okay, you had shown your true colors long ago, and now it becomes clear that you're not an ally, that you are someone, that you are the voice of the regime. So it's very interesting, again, this tribalistic element that if you toe the party line, although there's not literally a party, but if you toe the group line, you're out. And with Sam Harris, it was, again, the elections, the pandemic, and that discussion on trigonometry. By the way, kudos to the trigonometry guys. I think it was Konstantin Kisin, who yesterday posted that we are so sorry that the interview of Sam Harris on us became the reason of this, let's say, Twitter outburst against him. And they said something very nice, that we want to form discussions. We don't want to form witch hunts or something like that. Anyway, but again, just make it clear, Sam Harris was not canceled by anyone. By his own volition, he left Twitter because it had become too toxic for him. And with Claire Lehmann, she was the one who, at the beginning of the lockdowns, she had this historic tweet for me, which said that, well, in good times, I'm a libertarian. In bad times, though, whatever works. Centrist, lockdowns, whatever. So I think she was as bad as you can be on this topic. So that's when she lost the sympathy of many in the dissident right or whatever. And then, as you said, she was not defending the Australian measures, but she was saying it's not as bad, and you people don't really get how not bad it is. And that was the end. So lately, she also left Twitter. Now, there are 2 points on that. The one you already mentioned about the ID, the intellectual dark web, being over. And I think it's not going really to be missed. At the time when it came out, it was a breath of fresh air, because people like us, who were at the beginning of our journey on questioning, let's say, some of the central narratives in society, we thought, okay, there are intellectual allies there. We are not alone. But soon it became clear that it was not based on actual principles. And this is something that many of our friends need to understand. When we say that it's important to have principles in order to have alliances, we don't say this because we're sectarian. We don't say this because we don't want to form alliances. But you see how these alliances are very, very, very short-lived. You remember that famous photo in the restaurant with Sam Harris, Ben Shapiro, Jordan Peterson, and 5 years later, most of these people don't even talk to each other. And there's a reason for that. It's because they have so important fundamental differences that make even a friendship on a personal level almost quite impossible. Anyway, so these are the first thoughts. So the main question is Twitter going to become now so toxic that maybe Sam Harris and Claire Lehmann were up to something when they left? So we know that next week we're going to have the more accounts reinstated, banned accounts. And my take is, in short, this one. I don't care how bad the opinions of how bad the views are on Twitter. For me, the red line is when these people start harassing and annoying people and start forming Twitter mobs and threaten or post bad stuff of bad days that make someone feel, or at least make them feel threatened. So I wouldn't mind for many of the blacklisted people to return. I would mind, though, if they start. So if Milo Yiannopoulos is back, so as to post to Ben Shapiro a photo of a black baby and say congrats for your newborn or things like that, then he should be banned the next second. Again, it's not a free speech issue; it's a private platform, and it's in the same way. If you throw a party and someone shows up and they start acting like a jerk, they should be kicked out of the party. They should be physically removed from the party, to use a line that is familiar to many.
There's a lot to get into, but one thing that Milo brings to mind is that, like, there has been a very weird blending of internet culture with like real life politics that's happened. It's certainly Donald Trump is kind of like the symbol of that. And Milo was kind of one of the early figures in the sort of modern era, maybe just figures in general, of when this internet project starts to bleed into, outside the internet. And I think those two things were not really meant to mix. And it's bad news when they do mix. And it's proven itself to not really work. And it's proven itself to be very dangerous in my view. So yeah, like it's hard to draw, like, say, when is somebody inciting, a mob, right? Like, so if Milo wants to poke fun at somebody, and then, like, is he then responsible for all of his followers, then harassing that person? So, like, it's hard to say exactly. Or if Alex Jones suggests that Sandy Hook was staged, and that's his opinion, is he then responsible for his deranged audience going out and harassing the families of the Sandy Hook children? So it's a hard rule to enforce. And I will say this, what I find interesting is, like, a couple weeks ago, before Elon started reinstating people, Republicans or conservatives were having this kind of like coming to Jesus reflective week, where they were realizing after the midterm elections, it only took 3 elections in which Trump cost them, seats. So, like, you had midterms 2018, 2020, and then 2022. 3 elections until it finally starts to dawn on Republicans that maybe Trump is not as popular as we thought. Like, maybe, the world is not universally getting behind this guy to own the libs. And as they're starting to really understand this, Elon goes, okay, I'm bringing Trump back to Twitter. And they go, yeah, bring him back. Like, really, if Trump is costing you so much politically and he's causing you to lose elections, do you really want him back on Twitter just because you find him funny? And the answer is yes. And the more chaos we're seeing, yesterday, and I think we're gonna dedicate an episode to this on Monday. But Kanye West is announcing he's president, and in his announcement videos, he's shouting out Nick Fuentes, the notorious anti-Semite, Holocaust denier. Like, just, he is really reaching to the bottom of the barrel, if that's the metaphor. But just like all the right wingers, the dissident right, they're just like, oh, this is so funny, haha, what a crazy timeline. And I'm thinking, other than you being like a bad person, like, other than you standing for nothing in life by treating this whole thing like it's just one big cause for laughter, you understand what this is doing for the Republican brand, that the news that Trump had dinner with Nick Fuentes and Kanye West, and that Kanye is going to run for president now. That in itself, if that happens, is going to...
Wait, Trump had dinner with Nick Fuentes?
Yes.
Is this actually...
It's been reported that Kanye brought Nick with him to dinner with Trump. And that's very believable, because Kanye has been posting screenshots of his text message exchanges with Fuentes. So that I would not assume that Trump knew who the hell he was having dinner with. So, but it's not a good look. But it just kind of speaks to the fact that, like, Trump, he's just like this range of the moment idiot who, like, anyone who's nice to him and flatters him is welcome into the tent. And good luck getting Trump to distance anyone from him. And you can't even get, okay, you know what? I'll leave this alone for now, because we're going to do an episode about this on Monday. But yeah, it's starting to look like people on the right, they're sort of throwing their hands up when it comes to actually winning elections. They're just kind of like, yeah, well, we can have, we'll have the president of Twitter, like Trump will be the president of Twitter, and Kanye, and like the right will rule, and maybe they'll end up banning us from YouTube and Facebook and Instagram and everywhere other than Twitter, but we'll have Twitter, so the right will win the culture war by having twitter.com. I think that might be just what they're doing. Because now, like, bringing it back to the topic of the day, Sam Harris and Claire Lehman are leaving. I think they kind of, again, they represent a lot of people, but I will add this before I forget. The terms of service have been updated, and it says you may not deny a horrific event. So something like, and it lists as examples Sandy Hook, the Holocaust, 9/11. And nobody denies 9/11, but they obviously they blame someone other than the airplane hijackers for what took place. So, or maybe some people do deny that 9/11 happened. I mean, you got to remember, we're the old guys now. Some people, for all they know, they see the footage, and they're living in a world where you can fake anything using using a editing software. But anyway,
and this is an idea that comes from a very reputable sources like postmodernists like Baudrillard, who says, how do you know that what you see as a spectacle is actually true? More on that on my CRT course, but
very good. So this means, I think, basically Elon Musk and the powers that be have made it so people like Alex Jones and Fuentes will not be reinstated. So that's what those terms of service seem to reflect, which of course makes Elon look weak by everybody. Like people who want, absolute free speech on Twitter, they see this as a huge cop-out by Elon Musk. And people, who hate what's going on, I don't know if this is enough to really, so someone like Sam Harris, I don't know if he's going to stay on Twitter or return to Twitter because of this clause saying you may not deny horrible events. So it's kind of like, it just kind of makes Elon look capricious. Now, I like Elon Musk generally, but I don't really, I've long said he doesn't know what he's getting himself into by trying to play this culture war. This is not, it's not a game. Like it is, it's funny, it's fun, but it's also not. Like, you got to really know what you're getting yourself into. So maybe Elon Musk should stick to creating amazing products and sending people to space because he doesn't know what he's getting himself into by trying to, play this culture war game and fix what he perceives to be broken.
Okay, so my final words would be this before we go to Super Chat. First, I won't particularly miss those two because they were not that... prolific Twitter, so it's Twitter is going to be okay without them. But again, it's a problem, particularly with Sam Harris, if more and more people think that Twitter is going to become this toxic place, and it remains to be seen. The other thing is, final point, how did Peikoff put it? You've got disintegration, the chaos, the nihilism, the Trump, the Nicolas Fuentes. And then you've got misintegration. And I see a misintegration happening in conservatism, which means a false attempt to impose some theoretical order, some ideological order. And I see this being national conservatism. So more and more, I think that in the right, you'd have the seat posters, the people who are too toxic to even approach, and then the other pole, then the other center of gravity in the right will be the national conservatives, who will appear as the rational voice, who will appear as the respectable force. And again, I'm not, as we've said in the past, their ideas are really bad. Their ideas are actually, don't take my word, go read the latest book by Yoram Hazony, see what he says about pornography. So if you came to this milieu because you are interested on free speech, now both the seat posting right, the dissident right, and the national conservative right is not anymore your allies. The left is not your ally, or the centrists are not your ally, because you see how people like Lehmann so quickly will shift their position towards a position against freedom. So think again who you go to the ideological bed with. That's all I had to say.
So I disagree on really all of that. I don't disagree that the nationalist conservatives are horrendous, but I disagree first off that you're not going to miss Sam Harris and Claire Lehmann. We are going to miss them. I'll speak for both of us. I'm kidding, but like what I mean is I'm going to miss them because I've really increasingly found this sort of centrist voice represented by people like Sam Harris and Claire Lehmann. They are sort of where the light at the end of the tunnel is.
Oh, yeah, sorry, but let me clarify something. I mean that Twitter was not their thing. For Sam Harris, it was mostly his podcast. For Claire Lehmann, is what he was writing on Killet. So what I'm saying is that it's one thing if someone who is, Twitter is their number one thing if they leave, but for these particular people, Twitter was not that big of a platform anyway. So Claire Lehmann has Killet, Sam Harris has his podcast. That's what I mean. I'm not going to miss them on Twitter because they were not, particularly lately, they were not super active on Twitter. So that's
okay.
What I meant.
All right. Okay. Fair enough. But I just want to make that point on the episode that this sort of center, the people who they reject the wokeness and the sort of policing of language, and they reject Trumpism, this right-wing populism. They're generally for abortion rights. They're generally sort of small L libertarian in their attitude. These are the people to sort of talk to for the one reason that they are sober, and not literally, because I know Sam Harris is into hallucinating and learning things about himself that way, but they are sober in that they have respect for the intellectual process. And I think the sort of strength of the objectivists over the number of decades they've been around is that they've recognized that the world is not going to be changed by shouting louder than anybody else, but rather by having discourse or just by speaking to people that are receptive to intellectual arguments and points. So yes, reach for the center, I say today. These people are proving to be the saving force, whatever, the saving grace. In my view, not that the truth is to be found in the center, but that if there is any chance, like Orwell said, if there's any hope, it's with the proletariats. I say today, if there's any hope, it's with the centrists. Again, not because the center of every issue is the right one, but it's because the centrists they're sticking with the calm and patient process of discussion.
I get what you're saying. And I've heard Yaron, and actually I think he said it publicly. Yaron Brook said, if there was one person that I could take him and, let's say, make him an objectivist, and that would be a tremendous asset for the movement, that would be Sam Harris.
Yeah. And I think Yaron has also informed my perspective that, it wasn't real until I kind of learned it for myself. But once you realize it, you're like, oh, yeah, I heard him say that years ago. And you realize he was right, that the center is sort of where the hope is. Another point you made is that the shit posters, so to speak, these sneering, rude, cartoony conservatives are basically, they're going to lose political control, and that'll make the no-nonsense nationalist populists look serious by comparison. And I don't think that's necessarily true. I think the death of Trump, if that is what's taken place, the sort of political death of Trump, I think my opinion is, and my prediction is, it's taking a lot of wind out of the national conservatives and the populists. They wanted too much too fast. They thought, oh yes, like it would be like if AOC and her squad, they thought like they get Bernie in and they think like, oh, that's it, we'll never need to be tamed again. We've got it all. But no, it turns out the voters, they don't want to go that far this fast. My guess is, my prediction is, people like Josh Hawley, they're beholden to the voters, and the voters, the average person in America, the average swing voter, they're not into nationalism. They're not into subjugating their own personal interests for the so-called interests of the state. They definitely want nothing to do with a political figure that is affiliated with anti-Semites for a number of reasons. One of them being they know Jewish people in their life. So just like generally functioning, rational, educated, that's an important one. Educated people are not interested in these freaks of the right. And I'm guessing, my view is, these freaks of the right, including the no-nonsense, serious nationalist conservatives, they've lost a lot of confidence in recent times, and they're not going to look good once Trump disappears or the shit posters disappears. They're actually going to need to readjust themselves. People like Ted Cruz are going to need to maybe return back to more of an individualist, individualist, capitalist message, rather than this nationalist type thing. But hey, time will tell.
For what it's worth, though, Trump is still ahead of DeSantis in many polls.
Yes, and it's always been that everyone else splits the non-Trump vote, so Trump looks like he's super popular. Just like Fox News is the highest rated news channel that there is. Yes, because normal people get their news from all of these other platforms that are plenty problematic. There's plenty of bias in all the other news reporting institutions. There's plenty wrong with legacy media or whatever, non-Fox media. There's a lot wrong with them, but there's a lot of good things about them that Fox does not have, such as a basic level of education and reputation. Fox News has always been like a parody of a news channel. I'm learning every day, but we can talk about that more another day if you want. But yes, Fox is the #1 rated news channel because there's so many other options that break up the non-Fox viewers, right? Like there's normal people that are not into Fox. They get their news from all of these other outlets, whereas there's only one Fox. So yes, Trump is still the most popular, but I don't think he can win a general election because most people, the average person has repeatedly shown they don't want what Trump is selling. But hey, if Trump does become president again, it'll be by default. It'll be because the Democrats shoot themselves in the foot so badly. And then we got 4 more years of absolute stupidity. And then hopefully Trump actually leaves the White House and doesn't insist that it's an emergency and he needs to stay. All right. We don't even have any super chats. The Sam Harrises and the Claire Lehmans of our super chat community must have gone galt, so to speak. But Robin has been a member for 5 months, and he says, do you think watching the World Cup is giving sanction to Qatar and FIFA's decision to deal with a regime like Qatar to host the World Cup?
So here's my short pitch, because I know Razi wants to do a whole episode, although we should have done it at the early days of the World Cup. So I do watch the World Cup, and here's how I see it. I see it as a selfish act because football is such a big value for me. I understand the importance of condemning Qatar, but here's how I think about it. I'm vocal in condemning Qatar. Me not watch the World Cup would make absolute zero difference to Qatar's state or what wouldn't help in any way in condemning Qatar. So the only person I would punish by not watching the World Cup would be myself. Sometimes I hold my nose doing so, but football is such a value to me that I'm not boycotting Qatar. I'm open to, I know that many objectives disagree. I'm going to do also a new idea live with Agustina for the Ayn Rand Institute's channel to discuss this. But no, the short answer is I'm not boycotting it.
It's a very tough question. You know, it's a hard one. And, you know, if you're living in today's world, you are paying taxes to a government, not voluntarily, but you're paying taxes to a government that holds hands with the Saudi prince, the president. I mean, yeah, and of course, just generally our countries are friendly with various dictatorships where gays and women are treated, and God knows how they would treat the Jews if any Jews were dumb enough to go there. But, yeah, I mean, that's kind of the sad reality of the times we live in. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's okay to watch, you know, a Qatari held game. I understand your situation. Luckily for me, I'm not into soccer anyway. I don't really watch a lot of sports, so I'm not really losing any value, or I wouldn't be watching it no matter where it was.
By the way, today it's a big game. England plays the US. So, and I think it starts in 25 minutes. So that's why I want to have today an episode on the World Cup, but Razi wasn't available. So because I think he's pro boycott, and when Razi says he'll boycott something, he does it. He has boycotted in the past games taking place in authoritarian regimes. Anyway, it might happen.
That's amazing. I mean, he loves soccer, right? And it's called soccer. Okay. Football is that game where once in a while you kick the ball with your foot. That's real football. Okay. But anyway, I mean, he loves soccer. So if he's boycotting the game, that says something. For the
record, today I'm with the United States. So
that's right. And rightfully so, I'm sure. All right, everybody. Well, if you do watch the game, enjoy it. And, you know, you can buy your way into objectivist heaven, I say. If you feel bad for watching the game, make a contribution to ARCUK, become a member, and leave us a super thanks on the YouTube video on this very episode to express your repentance, your remorse for watching Qatar. But on a serious note, it is horrific what goes on in these countries, or I'm flattering them, even calling them countries. They're despotic, despotic regimes. No upcoming shows today. Wow, that's unusual. So that's the exception that proves the rule. You get so much content on this channel that it's odd to not have anything coming up. And tomorrow at 4 p.m. UK time, it's the Productivity Hub with Nicholas Krusik on romantic nationalism in music for ARCUK members. The session will also...
Nicholas, let me say one thing. Turns out he's a very, very good presenter, because he presented in my class And it was probably the best oral presentation I've had in the 2 years that I'm teaching that class. So up to the Productivity Hub tomorrow. He's a very interesting speaker.
Mm-hmm. And it'll also be live streamed for YouTube members. So hit that join button on YouTube. All right. Well, I know we got to end it there. You have a hard out, as they say. Now, Razi, the aforementioned Razi, has accused you of having false time constraints, which is supposed to make you look high value. Is that well, first of all, that's a rich accusation coming from him, since he barely ever appears, right? That makes him very scarce and high value looking. So it's an interesting accusation, but that is one way to look important, is when you always need to leave early. If you don't respond to the accusation, we can just assume it's true. Robert with 7 months has been a member for 7 months, and he says, "Show me the money." There's a movie reference. And then he shows us the coin. What is that? Some Greek lira or whatever you guys have over there?
No, we are in the European Union, and we are in the Eurozone, so it's a euro.
Very nice. All right. Well, have a nice weekend, everybody, and we'll be back next week for the Daily Objective. And last minute, Robert with $3 says, "Mo money." Well, more money, more problems, I say. All right. Thank you, though. And please leave a super thanks if you really feel bad for not super chatting us during the show, everybody. Thank you, and goodbye.